With polling day looming, 30% of Australians remain undecided as to who to vote for. And with the Prime Ministerial and political aspirations of Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison resting with the undecided, trust and who Australians believe is being more truthful could well be the deciding factor. Now, Sharon Box is a behavioural scientist and only one of the few experts in the world capable of detecting if people are lying or telling the truth and can be trusted through their facial expressions. Sharon joins the Transformer in the lead up to the election, giving her expert analysis and views of who Australians believe to be their preferred choice for Prime Minister and which of the two leaders are resonating most with voters. Because according to Sharon, the polls may not accurately be reflecting voter sentiment because what she's seeing may not be what the pollsters are seeing. Welcome, Sharon, and thanks for joining the team.
Thanks very much, Michael, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm actually one of many experts, but I'll take that compliment.
That's okay.
So it's a very interesting time for obviously politics at the moment. Lots of big decisions to be made, and of course the voters. We're all sort of glued to the TVs and watching the media and all the information that's just coming to us from all sources and trying to figure out what on earth does all this mean. So. But the behaviour of our two leaders really does affect how voters perceive their credibility. Are they being truthful and honest? Are they being open? Or what are they concealing? So there's a lot going on that we're trying to dissect as voters. So it's a very, I think, stressful time for a lot of people because they want to make a good decision and they want to align themselves with the leader that most reflects their beliefs and their views.
Now, Sharon, do people have a cognitive dissonance or a bias as to their party? Do we know inherently when someone's lying? Do we get that feeling that we either choose to ignore or in hindsight, we seem to be very accurate?
Well, Michael, when it comes to sort of lying, and that can mean white lies through to, full-on deception and malice, and there's everything else in between. So, we learn to lie as babies. We've been lying for a long time to survive, and we lie often for good reasons. So there's many reasons why we lie, those are the white lies. But what we want to be concerned about is when a lie has an impact, so it has some sort of repercussion. So that could be sort of financial, reputational, business, social, etc., emotional. So the thing about lying is that some people are better at lying than others. But what we have is we have a number of communication channels, which we're always communicating signals through, whether we're conscious of it or not. So we've got our facial expressions, we've got our gestures, we've got the way our posture is, how we move, how we speak, our tone, the blink rate, what we're doing with our mouths, wrinkling our nose when we're disgusted. And then the physical changes in our bodies. So we get the sort of the jittery and the red nose and all sorts of things are going on with the body. So there's all these channels that we're looking for signals, and we can't, when we're sort of communicating, we can't control all these things. We can control some of what we are doing. So we can control our words, so we can rehearse our words, but we can't rehearse our body language. We can't rehearse the physical changes that are going on in our nervous system. So if we can look across some of those things as well as the words, that gives us so much more information. And that's where I think people often, the words are important, of course, but it's how they're delivered. And are their words being matched by what they're showing with their body? And when it's not, well, that's a red flag. That means, okay, are they being honest? What are they concealing? Do they believe what they're saying? So that's why we're looking for these consistencies. So there's a few little sort of really, they're not really telltale signs, but they're things to really watch for when politicians are sort of speaking. And I give these tips to sort of, people that ask me. The one thing that is amazing is we all have this, it's a social norm where when we say yes, we do this. And when we say no, we do that. It's just something that's in our, in our culture. And most cultures around the world, there might be a few sort of differences, but generally speaking, when we're saying something positive, we'll couple that with a yes, and our body's doing this movement, and vice versa. And what we're seeing is when there's a clash of communication, when there's a clash of what someone's saying, what one of the leaders is saying, and what they're doing with their head, it's very telling, because it's saying, well, actually they're not very confident with what they've just said. You know, possibly they're just making that up on the spot. And when you see this sort of furrowing and sort of frowning and eyebrow sort of movement, there's a lot of thinking going on, and there's a lot going on with all of our bodies and our faces. So there's just so much information for us to take in. But when it comes to working out whether somebody's lying, there's a lot to look for, and you're looking for clusters. So you're looking for a couple of things that just aren't quite right. Then that gives you confidence that something's not quite right, and then you can either ask more questions or explore further. But just because somebody does one thing, so just because that, you know, they have one sort of behavioural red flag, it doesn't mean they're necessarily lying. Could mean they're just concealing an emotion, and emotions are really important because they drive all our behaviour. So when we see the leaders getting emotional, you know, whether that's, you know, anger or disgust or contempt or happiness or fear, that will impact how they come across. So it's looking for the micro expressions of our face and the emotion, and that tells us a lot, as well as if they're we want to make sure what they're flashing on their face is consistent with what the message is. So facial micro expressions are really, really important to look for when it comes to deception, and I'm seeing a lot of that leakage in both our leaders over the past few weeks of the campaign.
Yeah, that's one of my favourite sayings that I peddle is we're all first and foremost emotional beings. It's often the rationale and the reasoning that we apply to those emotions that's a convenient deception we tell ourselves. Now, confidence is a big thing. We're about to see our two leaders go up for their second head-to-head debate. How much does confidence play in it, and can confidence be faked or feigned?
Exactly. Confidence is a huge thing, because when we're communicating a message, we're doing all sorts of gestures and movements, and the bigger the gestures we have, and depending where we gesture. So with Anthony Albanese, when he starts gesturing up here and waving off the media and doing this, he's losing credibility and trust every time he does that behavior. Because when we're coming across as powerful and confident and trusting, we gesture sort of from this zone. So we have these big gestures. We want to draw the person in. So Scott Morrison is the master at doing the big gestures. So big open hand gestures. It's very confident. And I'm seeing him doing a lot more of that. That's his baseline behaviour, if you will. So he's a very seasoned and experienced speaker. So no doubt he's had a lot of training in body language and so forth. So the way we gesture really affects how people perceive them. So when you start gesturing up here, it's too much excitement, it's anxiety, it's nervousness, and it's just not a good thing. So it needs to be brought back down to here. And then at the same time, if we're gesturing too low that you can't see our hands, that's also going to affect how we trust and perceive somebody as well. It's almost a bit psychotic and a bit kind of, you know, dangerous and aggressive when we have our hands out of view and aren't sort of showing people, you know, what we're doing. And just even things like when you're leaning in and showing empathy and understanding the voters or the journalists or the questions, that's a big thing as well. So we see the press releases, and there's been many of them, which are fascinating to watch. And we see Scott Morrison, obviously, I think in front in that respect. He always knows his figures. He's, you know, I think it's that experience that comes through. He knows the figures. He answers the questions usually, but there's times where obviously he'll skirt around and deflect and not answer. And there could be lots of reasons for that. So, but obviously with Anthony Albanese, unfortunately, he had that really bad start where he couldn't name those two really important figures. And he's had a number of gaffes along the way. I think the recent one was around the National Disability Scheme. So it's, yeah, you have to know your numbers. And so by not knowing your numbers, those key numbers that affect policy, that the public are just thinking, you know, the confidence we have is going to start diminishing, and we're just going to think, I can't even trust this guy. He doesn't even know the main numbers. So, you know, so what they say is important, of course, but what they're showing is important as well. So we're looking for powerful body language that matches what they're saying. We're looking for somebody that knows, you know, the policies inside and out, and that just gives us more trust and confidence in what they're saying and what we believe.
Now, there's a lot made of Morrison's smirk by his detractors, a lot about his arrogance. Can confidence, or too much confidence, ever be a bad thing that isn't as compelling as what we would like it to be?
Yeah, look, we all have a baseline behavior. So, we all have our kind of resting face. And, whether it's a little smirk or a smile or a downturned mouth, we all have a baseline. And also our soothing behaviors. So with men, obviously, they move their tie around a bit. They might scratch the back of their head. They do various grooming behaviors, which is part of their baseline. And Scott Morrison is very good at controlling a lot of that. But with Anthony Albanese, you do see a lot of a lot of fidgeting and a lot of, he sort of shimmies his body, this sort of little shimmying, which again is a sign of probably either nervousness or anxiety or maybe a lack of confidence. But again, that's not coming across very well when we're watching him. But yeah, our sort of, when we've got about 18 different smiles, and smiles not necessarily mean we're happy. So we have, even contempt, where we just flick up one side of the cheek. And I've seen this in the leaders at times, which has leaked, so they wouldn't be aware they're doing that. But we've seen contempt flashes when they've been engaged in conversations with journalists. But yeah, they need to be careful, because it can be mistaken as being contempt or, sort of a smirk that's very off-putting. But, that's often just the way our face is. So I think with Scott Morrison, his face generally tends to sort of go back to that default. And it is a sort of, I think it is an overconfidence thing, but I think that's just what he's so used to. It's a habit. So yeah, so it's interesting. We all have our little quirks and behaviors and how we normally are. So it's just really looking for, right, that's how they are. And then when that changes, we know that, okay, something's happening here to their well-being. They've gone from their neutral face or their smirk face or whatever their resting face is to something else. So that's when we see different emotions coming through. Yeah. So our faces are our biggest indicators of emotion, as you know, and they give us the most signals and clues. So it's just watching for those little changes that happen.
Yeah, we saw after Albanese's well publicised and widely reported gaffe in the beginning, his confidence really took a hit, and now he's at the point where he defers to the ministers associated with the question that he's asked. Surely that can't be inspiring confidence.
Exactly right, Michael. That is just the worst thing that could have happened to him. So it's not going well. So, if you want to be a leader and you've got these policies, you need to know them inside and out. And if you pass the buck to somebody else, straight away, the public are thinking, well, this guy doesn't even know. So that's really, really affecting his integrity and his credibility and his trust factor. So it's not good, and it's just a cop-out. And we all have memory loss. We all, when we're under stress and when there's such high stakes, becoming, the leader, there's so much at stake and there is a lot of pressure. But if you can't handle that pressure, then how are you going to be acting in the job? So you have to set that kind of precedent really early. And I think handing off questions and getting someone else in to save you is not a good look. We see that as just a lack of confidence and a lack of knowledge. And yeah, we just don't buy it.
Great. Now, we've got our head-to-head debate coming up, televised, and I think it's one of the majors, Channel 9. What would you advise the viewers to look for on both sides?
Yeah, so this is going to be a really fascinating debate. It's going to be very, very high stress and high stake for both of them. I think as viewers, what we're looking for, of course, we need to listen to the words they're saying, but really it's often what they're not saying and what they're showing with their other communication channels that we should be looking at. So we're looking for consistency with their body and what they're saying. So I've seen this so many times throughout the election campaign where both of them, they've made positive statements, but they're doing this, which is that they're not really believing what they're saying. So look for that. Look for the head shake and the head nod. And if it's not matching what they're saying, that's a little red flag there. Could mean that they're concealing something or they're not being honest with us. So it's just a very simple, tiny little movement. And yeah, if you see a tiny little movement like this, tiny little movement, and it contradicts what they've just said, that is a red flag. And that's something that anyone can sort of look for. So that's a tip. And obviously they're going to be nervous. So the body language will be a bit jittery and a bit nervous, I would have thought. So, but it's really looking at the face and the emotion. So we could look for, we've got 7 universal emotions, which we all show on our face in the same way, using the same muscles. So we're looking for changes of sudden emotional expression on their faces when they're talking about a particular topic. So if they're talking about something positive, but they're suddenly showing fear or disgust or contempt, it's like, well, hang on, that doesn't match what they've just said. What, they're not really sure of what they've just said. So it's really looking for the changes in the emotions and working out, does that match what they've just said or not? And the more you start looking at that, the more you'll start seeing this emotional leakage. So you'll see, the wrinkling of the nose will come up when they're disgusted. And often they'll be disgusted at their opponent, or they might be disgusted at the question that's been put forward to them, or they might be disgusted because they actually don't know the answer. So they're actually disgusted at themselves. So there's a lot going on with our emotions, but they tell us so much about how the person's feeling at the time and also what they're saying. So everything has to be nice and consistent and flowing, body language matching what they're saying. And also another great tip is the shoulders. So when we don't know something, we do this, I don't know, we do this, the shoulders come up. It's just innate in our social norms. But when we're trying to conceal that we know something, but we don't really know something and we're not sure, one of our shoulders often just pops up just slightly, and it could be either one. And if you see that, that means, they don't really have much confidence in what they've just said. So, and I've seen that a couple of times, some of the press releases where they've given an answer, but a shoulder's gone up because they're actually not sure. So that's something else that they can look for. It's hard to see, but if you really sort of look, you can start to see that when they're not really sure of their answer. So there's a lot to look at. So it's going to be, I think, exhausting for the viewers to watch, but it will be very interesting, I'm sure.
Sharon, one thing that's exhausting me, if I hear we have a plan for that one more time without actually telling me the plan, or we'll have more to say on that in the coming weeks straight away, to me, I'm not sure if it's right or not. It just signals you don't have a plan, you don't know, because to me, it's the equivalent of when someone says, that's funny, instead of laughing. If it's funny, you laugh. And if you have a plan, you detail the plan. You don't say, well, we've got a plan. I think there was one press conference where Albanese said, we have a plan 30 times. 30 times. It was driving me mad.
Exactly. So, it's all about their policies, and we might not necessarily like the two candidates as people. And I've spoken to a lot of my friends and network, and they don't like either person as a person, but and they're trying to just look at the policies and who's got the better policies and who's in line with their views. But so the policies are critical. They affect all of us. So you can't make all these blanket statements. You've got to back it up. So if we're not seeing that, then again we're thinking, well, do they know what do you mean? So again, it's just really creating that sort of, that diminishing trust. So they have to back up what they're saying. And if they can't, well, we just don't believe it. We're just thinking, well, if they can't even outline their plan, do they have a plan? Maybe not, or maybe half a plan, or maybe they haven't thought it out yet. There's all these plans that would have happened in the future, isn't there? So
yeah, I think Albo's original gaffe has knocked the confidence out of him, and now he's trying to make himself basically a small target. And it seems like they're that similar on policies that the plan seems to be, well, we're no worse than them, but I'm a really nice bloke. And, it doesn't inspire confidence for me.
No, it's, when you're going against somebody who's sort of obviously been in the role, you're always going to be on the back foot, but you need to sort of set a precedent for yourself and who you are and what distinguishes you. So you're right, that initial, those gas where he just didn't those figures. And I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, he was stressed, it's, memory, whatever, but they're just critical figures that you have to know. So that really just didn't set himself up well. And yeah, he's been trying to recover ever since. And of course, he's under intense scrutiny from the media. Understandable. I mean, both of them are. They've both been asked very tough questions, but they're questions they need to know, because it affects the policies and it affects all the Australians. So they need to be across all these figures. And so, yeah, so we're seeing a lot of behaviour that's just not building trust, So, yeah.
Great. Well, Sharon, it's great to have you on board. So folks, it's Sharon Box, basically the human lie detector and probably the worst person you would ever want to play poker with. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome, Michael. Thank you.